Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for you joining me today. Tractate Masechta Daf 40 on A. Sage taught in a brisa. With regard to which you'll find on a linen cloak, Beis Shammai deemed the cloak exempt. Beis Shammai poetry. In the Sifri, the ruling of Beis Shammai is derived from the fact that the verse requires placing ritual fringes on your covering, kisut, Deuteronomy 22:12, which is a term that does not apply to linen. Rashi here explains that according to Beis Shammai, the mitzvah of ritual fringes does not avoid the prohibition against wearing a garment containing wool linen, because they understood the juxtaposition of two verses differently from Beis Hillel. When the verse states, "You should not wear diverse kinds of wool linen together," Deuteronomy 22:11, and then "You should bear for yourself twisted cords upon the four corners of your covering," Deuteronomy 22:12. Juxtaposition does not teach, as Beis Hillel maintained, that the mitzvah of ritual fringes overrides the prohibition of wool linen. Rather, juxtaposition indicates that the prohibition takes precedence over the mitzvah. The principle that a positive mitzvah over the prohibition does not apply. Muhammad Hashem and Tractate Shabbat. Similarly, in the Midrash Tanaim, the reason cited for the opinion by Shammai is that the Torah first presents the mitzvah against wearing the garment of wool linen, and it then mentions the mitzvah of ritual fringes. The mitzvah fringes, the fact that the sky blue strings must be made from wool, and there's a Torah prohibition against wearing a mixture of wool and linen. Beis Shammai deemed a linen cloak obligating the mitzvah of ritual fringes, and the halach is according to the statement of Beis Hillel. Rabbi Eliezer ben Sadok, who's that? There were at least two sages named Rabbi Eliezer or Lazar ben Rabbi Sadok. One of Jerusalem prior to the destruction of the temple and testified with regard to various aspects of the temple service and customary halachic practice in Jerusalem. Some hold that there are actually two different sages by this name who lived in the temple era. The first was a disciple of Shammai the elder. He was a storekeeper by profession and lived in Jerusalem his entire life. The second lived in a period immediately preceding the destruction of the temple and immediately afterward, and one of the sages of Yavna. He was the son of the famous scholar Rabbi Sadok, who was saved by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at the time of the destruction of Gittim 56b. There was another sage by this name, possibly a descendant of one of those mentioned above, who lived 3 generations later. He was a student of Rabbi Meir and a colleague of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. It says, but is it not the case that anyone who affixes sky blue strings to a linen cloak in Jerusalem is considered nothing than one of those who causes others to be astonished? What does that mean? Eina ela min hamas mihin. Rabbi Eliezer is ostensibly challenging the opinion of Beis Hillel, who hold that a linen cloak requires ritual fringes based on the common practice in Jerusalem. If their opinion is accepted, why are people astonished at those who follow it? In Rashi's second interpretation of this Gemara, he explains that this is actually a challenge to the opinion of Beis Shammai. Women actual attaching ritual fringes to a linen garment. The implication of being as a statement is the one who wears ritual fringes on a linen garment causes others to be astonished, but does not actually violate the prohibition as claimed by Beis Shammai. As a behavior, as appears he is violating the prohibition against wearing a garment containing wool and linen. Amar Rabbi. The Brisa concludes, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. If so, the halacha is according to Beis Hillel, and the linen cloak is required of ritual fringes. Why did the sages prohibit Lama Asaruha? The commentaries differ as to the meaning of this question and the Gemara's answer to it. Rashi's first explanation is that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is asking why, being that the halacha is the context of opinion of Beis Hillel. The sages prohibit affixing ritual fringes to a linen garment in Jerusalem. Alternatively, it is a general inquiry as to the reason for this prohibition. It is from Tosfot. The second explanation is that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is asking about the opinion of Beis Shammai, since even Beis Shammai concede that the prohibition against wearing ritual fringes on a linen garment is by rabbinic decree. What is the reason for that decree? Attaching ritual fringes to a linen garment in Jerusalem. It is because people are not well versed in the halacha and might ultimately wear garments of wool and linen even when it is not necessary for the mitzvah of ritual fringes. Rava bar Rav Huna said to Rava, if that is the concern, then let 10 people take linen clothes with ritual fringes, go out to the marketplace and thereby publicize the matter, i.e. that it is permitted to affix wool strings to a linen garment due to the mitzvah, Rava answered, all the more so people would be astonished at us for acting in such an unconventional manner. The Gemara suggests, let the rabbis teach during their public lecture that affixing wool strings to a linen garment is permitted for the mitzvah of ritual fringes. The Gemara answers, wearing strings on linen garment is prohibited because of a rabbinic decree due to concern that people might use strings that were dyed blue with indigo. Kala ilan, what's that mean? Gezeu mishum kala ilan. According to this phrase, because people are not well versed, should be interpreted to mean that people are not expert in discerning the difference between the chelet and indigo. And that's a response that attributed to the Rashba. Kala ilan, indigo. Indigofera tinnitura in the Latin, is a plant from the Fabaceae family. Its flowers can be red, pink or white, and indigo dye is produced from its leaves. This plant, which was used for a long time, the most important source of the blue dye for cloth, was grown principally in India, but also in other locales, including the Middle East. It is only in modern times that the use of indigo has decreased due to the availability of a synthetic substitute. Apparently, the plant-based indigo dye is very similar to the chelet dye produced from the cotton, but it was substantially cheaper. It was possible to detect that blue wool was dyed with indigo rather than the chelet only by a complex examination. Interestingly, blue dye derived from Murex tranquillis, the snail, had been identified by many contemporary researchers as Talmud Chilazon, from which the sky blue dye was made. It's chemically identical to indigo derived from this plant. And there's a picture of an indigo plant, cakes of indigo dye. The term derives from the Greek kalanos, meaning dark. Some say that it derived from kala in Sanskrit, where it also means dark blue. If so, the Hebrew term ilan, meaning tree, is added to indicate that it comes from a plant. With the chelet, the sky blue dye produced from the Chilat zone, 244b, in which case they were not for the mitzvah of ritual fringes and would violate the prohibition against wearing garments containing wool and linen. The Gemara suggests, even if one's blue strings are not dyed with chelet as required for the mitzvah, let them be considered merely as white strings. In the absence of the chelet, one fulfills the mitzvah with white strings, and therefore it should be permitted to affix white woolen string to a linen garment. The Gemara explains, since it's possible to fix white strings that are the same type of material as the garment, prohibition of diamonds kinds of overridden only in order to attach sky blue strings to the garment. As fulfilling this aspect of the mitzvah necessitates the use of wool. There's no need to use white strings made from wool. They can just as well be made from linen, and thereby fulfill the mitzvah without a written prohibition against wearing a garment made from wool and linen. One may not affix wool strings to a linen garment. The Gemara notes, this is in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish. As Reish Lakish says, any place where you find a positive mitzvah and a prohibition that clash with one another, if you are able to fulfill both of them, that is preferable. And if that is not possible, the positive mitzvah should come and override the prohibition. In this case, the clash between the mitzvah of ritual fringes and the prohibition against wearing a garment containing wool and linen, one can fulfill both of them by using white strings that are linen instead of wool if the garment is made from linen. The Gemara suggests. And then test the strings. We lived at Kuha. Rashi's second explanation of this, which conforms to the standard version of the text, is that sages should instruct people to test the blue wool that they buy in order to ensure that it is dyed with chelet and not indigo. For this purpose, they should also teach people how to conduct this test. It would then be unnecessary to issue a decree prohibiting people from fulfilling this mitzvah. Saying whether they are dyed indigo or to the chelet, as explained by the Gemara in 42b. The Gemara responds, while the prohibition against fixing ritual fringes to a linen garment is a rabbinic decree, due to the concern that perhaps the sky blue fringes were coloured with the chelet dye that had been used for testing. What does that mean? Tamir testing. According to the standard version of the text, the sentence is introduced with the word rather, indicating that the Gemara has now rejected the claim that the prohibition against wearing ritual fringes in the linen garment is due to the concern that one might use strings dyed with indigo. The Gemara is presenting a different reason for this prohibition, which is that perhaps the wool was dyed as a test, and nobody intended it should be used for ritual fringes, and therefore is unfit for the mitzvah. Conversely, some editions of the Talmud did not contain the word rather. Accordingly, Rashi explains that the Gemara had asked why there is concern that strings were dyed with indigo. Let people test the vats of dye to ensure that they contain real techilah. The Gemara answers that this process itself can lead to problems, as people may remove some of the dye to test it and pour it back into the vat, which would disqualify all of the dye in the vat can be used for ritual fringes. Consequently, the concern remains that the strings may have been dyed with disqualified dye. As well as mentioned both interpretation according to the latter version of the text. See Seva Hito. So the colour of the dye in the vat and therefore became unfit for to be. In such a case, there will be no fulfillment of the mitzvah of sky blue ritual fringes to override the prohibition against wearing a garment of woollen linen. The Gemara suggests, let's say just write letters. This means that the sages should send letters all over informing people that wool that was dyed with a dye used for testing is unfit for the mitzvah of ritual fringes, or that dye that was removed from the vat as a sample cannot be poured back into the vat. So Rashi, the Gemara's response is that it's not possible to assume that everyone received the letter and followed its instructions. Some explain that the Gemara means to suggest that dyed wool should require less of certification that it was dyed with a deal to chedet. The Gemara responds that this cannot be relied upon because people might forge the letters or take them from one batch of wool and reuse them with another. And that's from the Sefer Eshkol. Forming dye produced that the cheder was used for testing the colour of the dye in the vat is unfit for ritual fringes. The Gemara explains, shall we go and rely on letters, assuming that dye produced will follow the instructions they contain? Rambam responded to this and said, now, so moving on to Amud B, with regard to prohibitions against eating leavened bread on Passover and eating on Yom Kippur, which are punished by Kari. We rely on letters sent from the Binnacle court in Eretz Yisrael, publicising whether the year was declared a leap year and when they have declared the new moon. Here, with regard to the mitzvah of ritual fringes, which is merely a positive mitzvah, is it not all the more so correct that letters can be relied on? Rather, Rava said, this is the statement that I said, as was stated in the West Eretz Yisrael in the name of Rabbi Zera, in accordance with my opinion. The reason for the rabbinic decree is lest one's cloak rip within 3 finger handbreadths of the edge of the corner of the garment, which is where the ritual fringes are placed, and he sew it. What does that mean? Rashi explains that the concern applies to a case where the tear occurred within 3 finger breadths of a corner, because that is where the ritual fringes are attached to the garment. The concern is that perhaps he will attach linen string to sew the garment and then decide to use it for the mitzvah of ritual fringes. Only commentaries will tear after the ritual fringes have already been fixed. When he then reattaches the corner to the garment, the ritual fringes on the corner are unfit. This is because the principle prepared, and not from what has already been prepared, requires that the strings be affixed to the garment directly, and for the sake of the mitzvah. Whereas in this case, they were affixed to the garment through the sewing of the corner to the rest of the garment. Rav Amman gone, that's verse 41a, with linen string, and then use the excess for ritual fringes. And in such a case, the fringes would be unfit, because the Torah states you should prepare yourself twisted cords, Deuteronomy 22:12, which teaches prepare it, and not from what has already been prepared. Consequently, the strings must be attached to the garment for the sake of the mitzvah of ritual fringes. When the individual places the linen string there in order to stitch the garment and then decide to use it for the mitzvah of ritual fringes, and as sky blue wool strings, it does not fulfill the mitzvah of ritual fringes and violates the prohibition against wearing a garment of wool and linen. Because of this rabbinic decree, Rabbi Zera united the ritual fringes and removed them from the linen cloak. Rabbi Zera said the rabbinic decree prohibiting ritual fringes on a linen garment is also due and concern that one might affix ritual fringes to a nightmare garment. What does that mean? Nighttime garment, sorry. Tisus Laila. The Gemara states in 43p that the verse that you may look on it, Numbers 15:39, stated with regard to ritual fringes, excludes nighttime, which is not conducive to foreseeing. Rashi explains here that the concern is that one might wear the garment at night and thereby violate the prohibition of the various kinds when the mitzvah of ritual fringes is not enforced. This would also be prohibited if it was a daytime garment, since the obligation is determined by the time when he wears the garment. By contrast, Rabbeinu Tam holds that the mitzvah of ritual fringes applies to a garment that is generally worn by day, even when one wears that garment at night, and the mitzvah does not apply to a nighttime garment, even when one wears it during the day. Consequently, the concern here is that if one attaches wool strings to a linen daytime garment, he might also attach wool strings to a linen nighttime garment. In that case, since the mitzvah of ritual fringes does not apply, he would violate the prohibition against wearing a garment containing wool and linen. And let's see the Rosh for 1 She'agat Aryeh 30. Since the mitzvah of ritual fringes does not apply in that case, if one wears the garment, he will not fulfill the mitzvah and would violate the prohibition against wearing a garment with woman. And Rava said, this is a statement that I said, and it was stated in the West so in the name of Rabbi Zeil in accordance with my opinion. If the garment is made from cloth and its corners are made from leather, if a garment is made from cloth and its corners are made from leather, it's required to have ritual fringes. If the garment is made from leather and the corners are from cloth, it is exempt. Similarly, the fact that it is the main body of the garment, not the corners. This is according to the opinion of Rava and Rabbi Zema. And that's the Rambam Sefer Hava Hilchatzitz 3:4, or Chaim 10:4, which is not quite a ritual fringe, and then completed its fourth corner by sewing an additional material or cutting away some of the material. The ritual fringe is attached to the original corners. The corners are unfit. This is due to the principle of prepared, and not from what has already been prepared. Once a garment is required to have ritual fringes, one may attach the ritual fringes. The strings that were attached before the garment was required to have them are not fit. The Gemara raises an objection from a bite. It is told of the early generations of pious men that once they weaved 3 finger hammers of the length of the garment, they would affix the white and sky blue strings to the first 2 corners, even though the garment was not yet long enough to be obligated to have ritual fringes. The Gemara answers, say that the brighter should read as follows. Once they completed Shepatsu, I think I must have missed this, but this is a note about leather, shel ode. A leather article of clothing is not quite a ritual fringe. This is based on the fact that the verse requires strings on the corners of their garments, Numbers 15:38. Leather is not classified as a garment, as indicated in the verse, or a garment or leather, in Leviticus 11:32, pertaining to which impurity, or chashulchan. So go back to what we were saying. Kevan shepatsu. Rashi explained that at this point the garment is basically completed, since the location where the strings would be attached to the final 2 corners had been created. Consequently, the ritual fringes can only be attached to all 4 corners of the garment. In a Gershom, Margola explains that the Gemara means that even the final 3 finger breadths have been completed. According to this understanding, the point is that the parchment would attach the fringes to all 4 corners immediately upon completion of the garment. Along these lines, Sefer Ha'Itor notes that there is a version of the Gemara that reads, once they died, should have a 3 finger breadth of the garment, meaning that they affixed ritual fringes even before the garment is fully processed and ready to be worn. The correct version of the text appears to be Batsu rather than Patsu. Turns the word Patsu means Batsu, with the pair placing a bed, which is a common phenomenon. This term means completed. The root base Sadiq ayin appears in the sense of completion in the verse. Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of his house, his hand shall also finish. Tevat Sana, Zechariah 4:9. How to explain this term to mean undoing, which here over the garment and refers to the process of leavening unraveled threads at the end of a garment and the rashash. The Gemara, until there were only 3 finger breadths left to weave, they would affix the white and sky blue strings to the first 2 corners. The Gemara asks, and do we say prepared and not from what has already been prepared? If that is so, that this principle disqualifies ritual fringes that one affixed to a garment before he was required to do so. But does Rabbi Zera say, if one affixed ritual fringes to a garment that had already had ritual fringes affixed to it, hitamuteles, if one affixed ritual fringes to a garment that had already had ritual fringes affixed to it, and he had intended to nullify the first set, then he may remove the first set and the remaining ritual fringes are fit. But if he had intended to add the first set, the fringes are unfit, even if he later removes the first set. This is due to the fact that when he added the second set, he rendered all strings unfit. Then when he removed the first set, the second set remained unfit because of the principle prepared, and not from what he has already been prepared, as when he placed the second set initially, it was not fit. The Ramah writes that there are those who deem the second set fit, even in the case where he intended to add to the wash, and this is the accepted opinion. In any case, it's noted in the base here so that all the ritual fringes are certainly unfit, while both sets are attached. The Imam says, "I have the Hilchot 1:15, Shulchan Aruch Chaim 10:6." Rashi explains that once the first set of ritual fringes are removed, the second set fit. Similarly, while both sets are attached to the garment, for which case adding to a mitzvah nullifies the entire mitzvah, and both sets of ritual fringes are unfit. See the Beis Yosef. Rabbeinu Gershom Mohagola explains that the Gemara is referring to a linen garment, and Rabbi Zeir's point is that even though the second set of ritual fringes contains wool and is a necessary one, that does not violate the prohibition against wearing a garment containing wool and linen, standing is apparently based on the Gemara. Then remove the original strings, it is fit, despite the fact that he attached the second set, they were superfluous. This indicates that even if one attaches ritual fringes to a garment when there is no obligation to attach them, the ritual fringes are fit. However said, this does not present a difficulty because now that he adds a second unsettled set of ritual fringes and is liable for violating the prohibition of adding to a mitzvah, Deuteronomy 13:1, is it not considered an action? There are different versions of the text with corresponding differences in interpretation. The standard version includes the word now, which usually introduces a rhetorical question. This is missing in other versions of the text. All interpretations rely on the idea that the principle prepare it, and not from what has already been prepared, indicates that ritual fringes must be appropriately affixed to the garment by an action performed at a time when the garment is required to have ritual fringes. The version of the text known to Rashi apparently did not have the word now, and he therefore explains this line as a statement. Because attaching the second set of ritual fringes violates prohibition against adding to a mitzvah, it is not deemed an action. Removing the first set is therefore viewed as an act because the second set of ritual fringes is stated as such. Consequently, the second set of ritual fringes is considered to have been attached to a garment that required ritual fringes, because at the time when the relevant act occurred, either removing the first of the garment became required to have ritual fringes. Consequently, this means the requirement of the principle prepare it, and not from what has already been prepared, and the second set of strings is fit. Similarly, Rabbeinu Gershom Mohagola explains that the act of attaching the second set of strings cannot be considered an action, since this garment already had ritual fringes attached. According to the standard version of the text, this sentence is a rhetorical question, and therefore must be understood in the opposite sense of the previous explanation. The fact that one is liable for violating the prohibition against adding to a mitzvah means that affixing the second set of ritual fringes must be viewed as a significant action. Consequently, the strings are considered to have been given their status via an action, and therefore, conversely, in the case where one placed ritual fringes on a garment that had only 3 corners, the strings became attached to a 4-corner garment via an action that one performed on a garment rather than an action one performed on the strings, and therefore the strings were unfit. The case of in the explanation of the Rambam say Fat Emet. By contrast, the Tat and the Gemara explain that rather is challenging the opinion of Rabbi Zeira and asking why the ritual fringes are fit if one placed them on a garment that already has ritual fringes. Since he violates the prohibition against adding to a mitzvah, the initial placement of the ritual fringes is certainly considered an action. Since the second set becomes valid when the first set is removed, the second set is not becoming fit to an action. It is therefore unfit due to the principle prepared, and not for what has already been prepared. But Papa objects to this. Interpretation of Papa's interpretation depends on the interpretation of the statement of Rava. According to the interpretation of Rashi and Rabbeinu Gershom Mohagola, Rav Papa is rejecting the reasoning of Rava by asserting that placing the second set of ritual fringes is considered an action. Therefore, the original objection from the statement of Rabbi Zeira remains. The Kesef Mishnah explains that according to the interpretation of the Rambam, Rav Papa accepts Rava's basic assertion that affixing ritual fringes to a garment that already had ritual fringes is considered an action, and therefore they are not disqualified on the basis of the principle prepared and not from what had already been prepared. Yet Rav Papa limits this to where he intended to nullify the first set of ritual fringes. Where he intended to add to the original set, all of the ritual fringes are unfit. See Tat Square Sfat Emes, who explained that Rav Papa is defending Rabbi Zeira's opinion as see Keren Ora. From where is it known that Rabbi Zeira is discussing a case where the person intended to add to the original set of ritual fringes? Perhaps Rabbi Zeira is discussing a case where he intended to nullify the original strings, and therefore there is no prohibition of adding to a mitzvah, and there is an action. With regard to the issue of affixing ritual fringes to a garment that already has ritual fringes, the Gemara relates Rabbi Zeira said that Rav Matana says that Shmuel says white and sky blue strings are not subject to prohibition of diverse kinds. This refers to a case where one attached ritual fringes to a linen garment, or where the ritual fringes themselves included both wool and linen. See the best citing Rashi. Consequently, note that the fact that the phrase is introduced with the word "and" indicates there's a significant additional statement, even where the cloak is required to have ritual fringes. They explain that this applies in a case of one who wears the strings with various kinds at night, when he does not fulfill the mitzvah of the ritual fringes. Similarly, although the priestly vestments contain wool and linen, one does not violate the prohibition of his kind of wearing priestly garments, even if he wears them at a time when he is not performing the temple service. And this is the halacha even if they are fixed to a cloak that is exempt from ritual fringes. The Gemara asks, what is meant by a cloak that is exempt from ritual fringes? If we say they're referring to a cloak that is not of the size necessary to acquire the fixing of ritual fringes, this is difficult. But in Torah, in the Bible, with regard to a cloak that is large enough for a man to cover his head, most of his body with it, and just go on to the next step quickly, and an adult goes out in the public domain while wearing it, and it is required to have ritual fringes. So what does it mean? A cloak that is large enough for a man to cover, etc. Talis, shakatan, if a garment is large enough to cover the head and body of a minor who is old enough to walk around the marketplace by himself, one is required to attach ritual fringes to it. The Gemara adds that this applies only if an adult would occasionally go out in public wearing that garment. I'm going to say, if I have a hilchot 63:1 or 16:1, and what's the footnote? The Haggadah Yossi B'derech Harai. Some commentators understand this as an additional criterion. According to the explanation, only a garment that meets both of these criteria is required to have ritual fringes. Others hold that the only criterion is that the garment is large enough to cover most of the child's body and head. The Gemara here means that if the garment meets that criterion, the Adam must place the ritual fringes on it, even if he wears it only on occasion. That's in base Yosef. Thanks very much for listening, and take care. Peace in Israel, and all the best. Bye.